this afternoon we're looking at hollyhocks, and we have very long composition. So if you haven't done the drawing, there is a video for the drawing separately to help you with it. So the plan for today, we'll work into some of the flowers first, and then we'll work into the background of these blues and greens, and then we'll start introducing other elements. For example, the silhouettes of the flowers, the tops of the flowers for the buds, and the leaves. Okay, so because we will be doing a few layers on the flowers, that will be quite nice to get started with them and then work onto the background. So it's a little stage breaking explanation now. So let's start with exploring some of the color first. So I'm going to use a medium round brush, and I'm going to try some of my pinks, violets, purples, yellows. Right, before I get started, I need to make sure that I'm going to wash my paints. So for example, I want some pure yellow, cadmium yellow. I don't want any green on it, because when I'll start mixing some pinks and reds with it, the green will spoil my colors. So pale yellow, for example, for the tops, for the tips of the inside of the flowers. Yeah, so that's going to be some nice fresh yellow, and I can more or less immediately go for it. So where the center parts of my flowers are, I can leave a few dots here and there, leaving some of the gaps just for those center pieces. Oh, I think I've forgotten to draw one here, but I can see it here now, so I can just put a little line for it. Okay, I've forgotten to put one here as well. Or maybe I've just forgotten to, this is a piece I've sketched second time, traced second time. So maybe it's on my original drawing, but I've forgotten to trace it. Okay. I just wanted to possibly have a couple of options for us later on if I wanted to paint over. Right, so yellow is done. Very easy, straightforward, leaving some white gaps, bit of yellow across. Okay, let's have a look what pinks, reds we've got. Again, I'll just need to go and wash my paints here. I want some fresher colors here. I don't want cadmium red, but now I can see where that color is. So all of us will have slightly different reds, slightly different purples, violets. So let's just see what we've got. So I've got some of that pale pinky color. I've got something a little bit more darker, magenta-ish. No, it's not quite magenta. That might be okay, that's more magenta. If I'll dilute it a little as well, I'll put a bit more water into that. There might be some quite nice magenta color present. Let's have a look what this color is. Okay, that's purple, so that's quite a nice deep purple. And I also have my violet here. Okay, so that's much more cooler color here in comparison. So any of those colors or similar colors or combination of colors, because we'll be mixing them together, will be brilliant. And what we'll do for the flower center parts, we'll have our lightest pinky color, so not the orangey color. If you have an orange red, maybe just leave it for the moment. Maybe go for the pinky red. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the gap for the stamens. I'm going to pale going to paint around it with my pinky red. Okay, so it's nice and soft. I'm going to look for maybe some of the shadows that sometimes in there might be, we might have sketched them out as big shapes, yeah. And I'm going to add a bit more purple or magenta. Okay, I'm just going to check that one here, maybe magenta better. Okay. I'm going to add it just gently coming out from the center, maybe coming out a little bit out into the petals. And I'm going to go and add some violet. If you don't have violet, any of the purples with extra blue will do the same effect. And we can have some pale shapes of violet introduced to parts of the petals. We can do all the details afterwards, but that will be kind of the shape of the flower we'll be ending up with. Yeah. We're not going to be outlining it. I'm just trying to find some gaps, how the borders of the flowers bordering with other shapes. Okay, so that's one way of painting our flower. Nice and bold and fresh and strong. Okay, we could build up the layers the other way around. We can start with pale purples and start working towards the center, but I think because our flowers are quite small, we can manage to blend the two colors together, and it also will come out much more fresher. If we'll do purples and then start it in pinks, I think it might be, it doesn't mean that we can't do it. I think it will start giving us too many layers, and we'll start overworking the flowers. So let's give it a go. Now I painted quite a big flower here. Our flowers are quite small in size. So I'm going to go for some pink. Nice strong pink. I'm going to go for that top flower here. I'm going to paint around the stamens area. Nice and confident. I've got quite a lot of moisture on my brush. I better leave a little bit of extra space for the yellows rather than overwork it too quickly. Yes, or rather than shrink it too quickly. I'm going to look for the pencil line I've created here, where I'm going to put my pinks. Okay, so maybe somewhere around here. Okay, and I'm going to go for some violet, my cooler color. I'm going to dilute it. I'm going to keep it quite pale. First of all, I'm going to stretch my pink to my final pencil lines while it's still wet together, and it could run into my violet. And secondly, I'm going to drag that violet a little bit outwards, for example here for the bottom parts of the petals. So I'm just using a full length of the brush. I just make it a tiny bit more pale in some of the areas, and then start stretching some of the lines out. This flower hasn't got as much big shadows, but has a lot of little lines. Okay, maybe even stretching some of that pink out from the petals. Okay, I'm going to leave the edges of the petals white. I'm just going to look for that softness of the texture. Okay, and I can add in the middle of my pink, I think I can add maybe some magenta here, a bit more stronger in color. Maybe even a tiny bit of violet, mixing it together. I'm going to repeat the same process for the flowers, so I'm going to talk you through it again and again. Okay, my area is drying here. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit of color and soften some of it. Make it run gently. If I want to stretch this color for some of the little lines, just be careful not to have too many dry lines. Okay, this is a very quick process. If it's too much information, be with me. I'm going to repeat it on a different flower very shortly. Okay. Right, my first flower is done. Good. The other flowers will be very similar, but done a little bit bigger or in a smaller scale. Okay, so this is most kind of, this formula will apply to all the flowers to more or less kind of volume. Pink first, diluted violet connected to the pink border, stretched into the petals, and then worked into little nuances of lines.
Julia, Margaret here, sorry. Oh. I mean,
okay, let's do one of the smaller flowers. I'm going to use a smaller brush because it's going to take quicker to do it. So I've got a flower on the left-hand side to my first one. We only see the side of it. So I'm going to go for pink here. I'm going to add it next to some of the leaves, shapes, drawings here, right to the edge of it. Okay, I'm going to add a tiny bit more water, and I'm going to drag that color out with big maybe strokes like that. Okay. Okay, let's just come out a little bit flat on the bottom. I want a bit more of volume on the bottom. I've got a tiny bit of a magenta or the same pink. And all I'm going to do now with clean brush, I'm going to drag some of the texture out to the borders of my flower, okay, where my pencil is finishing. Pencil lines are. And I'm just going to stop again. Okay, it's another flower done. Got a bit more sharp edge here. So we're keeping them quite fresh, quite light. The boldness in them, but also a lot of light. Okay. Let's do another flower. Well, let's do the buds. The buds are very easy. All I'm going to do is super fresh pink, as bold as I can get it. Nice pink at the tip, whatever the pointy part of the bud is. And I washed the brush, I dried the brush. I'm going to stretch that border, the sharp border, very, very gently outwards. There's a tiny bit of green on the bottom. I might just blend it with it. Now, tiny bit of green and yellow. And if I'll do a minor stroke on the bottom, and then just gently blend it, that's it, done. Another bud. Same thing. Sorry. A pinky center part, kind of pointy end, where the petal is going to be the most strongest in color. Wash my brush, dry my brush. I'm going to drag that color towards the center. Okay, that doesn't give me much color, so I can pick it up from the palette a little more. Okay, that's better. Okay. And I might go for again the same yellowy green with tiny bit of yellow. Oh, sorry, tiny bit of, yeah, just tiny bit of yellow, yeah. We'll paint most of the leaves with that color, maybe a bit more yellowy edge, just very, very soft, not doing any other things which might be on our sample yet, but all we want is just a bit of color, pink and green, a little bit merging softly. Done. We'll add some hints of darker greens afterwards. Another flower here on the left hand side, exactly the same principle, pink. Okay. I'm going to be careful now with the petals of my first flower. So the middle section of the new flower I'm going to paint is going to be behind. It's going to offset the silhouette of the flower in front. So I'll paint darker pink around the stamens here. Too much water on my brush, so I'm going to reduce that one. I'm going to define the petals of the flower in the front. So I've got the nice shape or whatever the shape I need. Okay, so that's gonna go up. I'm gonna do the same on the other side. It's only a small area here. Okay. I'm going to wash my brush, dry my brush. I'm going to drag this pink out. Okay. So I don't have a sharp edge. Okay, this way I can drag it that direction, following the shape of the petals. This following the shape of the texture. Hardly anything here. Okay. And then I'm going to add my magenta and violet, something darker, whichever color you have. Okay, next to the stamens, so the yellows will start singing even more. And maybe just reduce the amount of that dark magenta and do some of the textured lines a little bit going. Just be careful not to make them too dark. This is a flower at the back. If you do them a bit too strong, maybe just gently dilute them. So I'm softening mine because they come out a bit too strong. They shouldn't be competing with the flower at the front. Yes, we can touch up the flower at the front at some point, but we don't want it competing after all. Okay, tiny bit of lines on the other side. It's a complex painting today, but it's not difficult. The elements will be repeating the same and the same and the same. We're just going to be changing their shape. But the color is going to be repeating the formula of what we'll be doing, we'll be repeating all the time. So if you've got a rough idea of what we're doing, that's it, you're the winner. So my color ran a little, so I'm just gonna let it dry gently here. Okay, that's all lovely. Let's have a look at the color of the flower further again here on the left. An area below our original flower. So again, going for some fresh pink. Painting around the yellow stamens shape. you need to leave any whites, leave in a bit of white. Coming close to the petals of the flower above. Just control the amount of water so it's not too runny. Okay, our pinks are going out. We can again define the shape of them. Petals coming out. I'm going to wash my brush, dry my brush, get some of the pale pinks smudged and stretched further to the pencil lines. Some areas more than others, but this flower is going to have probably the most of darkness in comparison to the other paints. I think I've got a bit of magenta. There's a bit more darkness in this corner on the petals above, and I'm going to have some darker magenta, maybe less water, tiny bit more magenta, tiny bit of violet, right in the center of the flower, showing. I think some of it is drying. If it dries, we can soften it. Once we reapplied it. I'm washing my brush and drying my brush. Gonna soften some of these sharp edges or sharp veins. Or introducing much more settled and soft veins. Okay. Stamens are now starting to look a little bit too bold and yellow, but that's okay. We can work with it. Just work with the shapes of the flowers. Okay. Let's do another small one here. On the right-hand side. Now that one hasn't got as much pink, but has a lot of violet. So I'll put a very small amount of pink and then follow the same formula. Small amount of pink on the edge, around the stamen here, this side. Gonna lift some of that extra pinky water. I think it's too much for me here. Wash my brush, dry my brush, load a small amount of violet, diluted violet, and let's just drag some of it out. Actually, let's put some darker tone where the darker violet is here on the edge. Just control the amount of water you have. If it's too much, dry your brush with color, so then the color remains intensive, but you have the control. Okay, so that's going to be one petal, and the other one's going to be just quite pale white with just some veins. If the veins coming out too dry, I'll wash my brush, I'll dry my brush and soften some of the veins, some of the other edges, or anything else that feels a bit too harsh. I want to add a bit more depth to it, so I'll go for stronger violet and magenta together. Hardly any runniness in that paint mixture, so then I can touch it up. Okay, that's very dark, so I'll have more magenta rather than violet. Okay, that depth is building up beautifully. Okay. So we're following the formula of the flowers we're establishing rather than copying the inspirational piece of artwork. We simply wouldn't be able to do it exactly. Okay, because of the flow of the water, flow of the colors. Okay, I'm going to go for now the larger flower below. So exactly the same principle. Let's have some bold pink first. Let's just apply it around the yellow stamens. Leave some white. I deliberately leave it slightly bigger. We can always shrink it. Okay, paint the space around it. Okay. Get some violet on your brush. Connect it with the existing pink. Some of the edges will stay sharp. Have a look which ones you're going to preserve nice and bold and strong in color, and which ones you might want to soften with some water. For example, this white gap could be just softened until we can have a little bit of a gap here, a bit of paler color. I think it's drying now, so I'm just going to introduce bolder pink across. Okay, my pale violet or purple now, because I'm mixing it with some reds. I'm going to stretch some of that color out. Some of this color coming out here. I'm going to carry on creating some little textures from these shapes, blocks of purple and pinks. Here's another little, that's a bit more of a detailed flower, but again, if you see something else, if you want to follow a similar formula, go for it, but don't overwork it. Okay, so overall shape, maybe something like this. Right, while it's still a bit wet in the middle, I'm going to go for a bit more violet and magenta. A bit stronger, and I've forgotten to make it a tiny bit more darker. Now, it's drying now, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to add this darkness here first. And then I'm going to soften part of it, because I don't want some of these super sharp lines staying strong in darkness. I want them to be blending a bit more, settled in that darkness. That's lovely. Okay. Not overworking. Less is more. We can always touch it up afterwards. I'm not doing any definition on the edges of the petals whatsoever. Okay, I can touch up a little bit of a shadow here. Less is more. Okay, they're glowing. Hopefully they are glowing. If they're starting to look a little bit dull, it means you're using too much color, too much variety of color, or maybe the oranges start being present from cadmium red or something like that. Sometimes that's takes away that freshness of the violets. Okay, I'll stop at that, otherwise it's going to be too much. Okay. And there is a last flower of a similar type is below, but it doesn't have any pink, just got some probably magenta and some pale violet. So I'm gonna go for some magenta. Right, and the last flower, going to establish the darkness, work into the shape of the petal here, its curvature, its silhouette. And then I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to drag this color with a very, very pale violet. I've got a bit of hint of blue in it rather than too much pink. Okay, tiny bit more water so it's not too dark. And most important, I'm going to soften this edge. I'm going to drag that edge out. On the right hand side, I'm going to create a little highlight. So I've stopped, I didn't go all the way down to the petals. I've just stretched it a little bit. I left a whitish space. And then from the bottom of the petal, I'm dragging the color and I'm connecting it at the top here. And then I can put little veins here. And then connect it with the other veins, or connect it, bring some stronger color veins, just a small amount again to show a little bit of texture. If the part of these petals are still wet, that will be even better result. Maybe softening them at the bottom so they're not jumping out to us too much. Okay. Background is going to have simple number of colors. It's straightforward, but just watch me first. I'll talk it through as well. So somewhere behind our central branch of the hollyhocks, we've got some light. So we're going to put a bit of yellow in there, very, very diluted yellow. We don't want super strong yellow, but we want diluted one. And we're going to put it similarly pale yellow somewhere close to the second branch here, because we're going to have very dark flowers. So we're painting over the flowers, painting over the branch of the plant. Okay, once the yellow is done, it's very, very pale yellow. We're gonna go for some pale blue, so sky blue probably. Yeah, we're gonna do another corner here very quickly. Most of the corner on the side, so you'll need a bigger brush or a squirrel brush. Okay, once the blue is done, we're gonna quickly go into some small marks of pink. Okay, and small marks of some indigo, just to put a little bit more darkness in there. Once that one's done, we can then come close to the edge of the kind of the buds here, and mainly the flower here, right? So on this dark corner, so, and paint anything between the two flowers on the top here with a darker blue color. Okay, all the rest is going to have soft edges, and we're not painting anything below. So pale yellow, blue, and then all we'll do, just dip into some pink and dip into some another type of blue again. Okay, are you with me? Give me a wave if you are. Fantastic, that's good. Just checking if recording is still going and you can still see me. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. Watch me, I'll talk you through it again when you start doing it. So pale cadmium yellow with a big squirrel brush or a big flat brush. Okay, that looks a mucky color, so I'm going to wash my brush better and clean my yellow. Just checking that the colors are good. Okay, you can check your colors on the side, what they look like. Now what I haven't done, I should have asked you to make the whole area here wet, so to keep, otherwise everything will dry very quickly for us. So I'm going to wet all the surface here. Okay. Wet all the surface where I want it to go. Don't need to go any further down. Don't need to come too close to my flowers here because I'm going to merge the darker color, so it doesn't matter. But this area I need to keep damp. Okay, so my brush is loaded with yellow already. Some soft pale yellow, soft color somewhere here. It will dry paler, so I might just gently increase some of it somewhere here. Okay, brilliant. Going for my sky blue, just washing this yellow off. I don't want any green there. Okay, that's a better color as well. Okay, so pale blue is going to come all the way across. No. I put my brush in the wrong blue again. I don't think I've got my favorite. Okay, here we go. So some pale blue is coming up here as well. Don't want to go any further down, so I'm going to soften it. And if it runs gently down, that's fine. But everything else stays where it is. I'm gonna go for a similar pale blue all the way across here. Okay, maybe move into a little bit more of ultramarine. So yeah, or if you've got some violet close by, the same thing will happen if you mix those two colors together. So very soft, very runny. Okay, colors are merging together. We want it reasonably dark. We don't want to be too pale. I think Some of this blue could be a tiny bit more stronger. Otherwise, it's going to be too pale. Okay, that's good to go and merge with my yellows. Nice and pale. Okay, that's all good. Now I'm going to go for some pink. I'm not going to make it too strong. And I'm going to dry my brush before I apply it to my paper. The pink is there, but it's not too strong. But I can work maybe a little bit more diagonal. There's lots of water on the paper. So if my brush got too much water, it's going to be a puddle. So I'm introducing it after dabbing on my tissue. Okay, where some more pink might be going. Okay, I quite like it like that. Okay. So we'll all settle in, and I'm going to put a little bit of ultramarine on top as well. Okay, that's a nice strong color. Again, getting all the water off the brush. On the border with some pinks, let's put a bit of that ultramarine. Okay, it's a bit of artistic license here. It's a bit too strong. You can just gently touch it up. But I think it will settle in quite nicely. And now I can take a smaller brush and close to the edge while the edge is still wet here. I'm gonna go for my round brush. I'm gonna go for one of my blues with some of these pinks and merge that softness of the existing color and define my petals of the flowers on the border with the background here. And that's when I can take my time a bit more. And decide on the darkness. If I'll keep it a centimeter to an inch depth, yeah? So it's not just an outline around it. I want it to be blending with the background. That's the main part. I'm not gonna go over the stem here, but at this stage, I can soften the edge of this dark pattern so it blends with my previous colors. I'm going to double check if I need to have anything darker here. A little further away from the flower. Keeping it soft, keeping it fresh. I think that looks quite nice. Maybe a little gap between them. Bud and the leaf and the flower here as well. That's very easy. I can just fill it in. That similar shape could be done between the flower here and again the background. Just going to merge it with my soft background pale colors. And then this stage of the painting of the background is done as well. You can do tiny bit more darkness in here. And a couple of isolated spots. Just putting a droplet of darkness. If it's too runny, just dry your brush. Okay, so that tension's building up nicely. There is no sharp edges for the end of the dark blue. There are sharp edges next to the flowers, but not for the background. Okay, so that's all stay pale. Easy, but complex. Yeah, loads of things in one go. Okay, so we'll do the rest of the background, which is just only this bottom left corner. I'm going to preserve the bottom right corner because there are a few details and we just do little sections at a time there. But tiny bit more here and tiny bit more here, mainly bottom left corner. So I'll use my squirrel brush and pale yellows and pale green colors. So first of all, I'm going to wet all the surface under the flower here. Okay. And then I'm gonna go for some yellow, green. If you haven't got a yellowish green, just go for any green. And by the time you mix it with some yellow, you will have a similar color. So that's quite nice and yellowish color here. I'll just stretch it. I want to make it quite strong. It's pale. And I'm going to increase the amount of green. Okay, just going to soften just over all of this area. Okay. I'm going to come close to the edge of the flower, maybe a bit more close to the buds, and just stop. I have a tiny bit of blue on my palette here. I might just put a hint of blue somewhere here as well. And just see how it will just spread. Okay, we'll be working into details into this, but this is just stay soft. Just making sure that we have the edge between the two backgrounds merging well, so we don't have a sharp edge. So I'm going to actually put it a little bit higher. That green. I can paint over the flower if I wanted to. That flower is going to be dark. There's a leaf here. Could paint over it, but we're going to be painting. It's nice strong color anyway, so I think I'm going to leave mine out. And another pale green area is somewhere here. Without making the area wet, I'm just going to go for pale green, yellow and green together. It's somewhere this edge. Just make it a tiny bit more less strong. Okay. And my buds branch in the low corner, I can just paint it all together as a very pale yellowy green color. So then I've done all the highlights on it, and then I can work into the shadows of it afterwards. So all of that one's finished there as well. A few shapes of pinks will be coming in, but it's not important yet. Just soften all the shapes here. So there's no sharp broken lines, dark lines. Same for this one, just make sure that it doesn't have a sharp, strong line. All the rest is fantastic. My next step will be working into the top parts of the branches of the hollyhocks. I'm just getting some fresh paper towel here. Sorry for extra sound effects. I'll use a medium round brush, synthetic brush, so I can have more control when I'll start painting the branches. So for example, I'll start with this bluey purpley branch. I'll work from the top and I'll fill it in all the way, okay? So I'll work with the same color. It will start a tiny bit paler and we'll get a tiny bit more darker at the bottom. But in some places I might need to gently, maybe over some of the ovals, dry it up. So to dry some of the areas, I'm going to have another small brush available, which I'll just wash, just wet and dry. So it's moist, but not just completely bone dry. Okay, So let's mix some colors. Ultramarine and tiny bit of purple or violet, whichever you have, or both. So we're going to start with some paler color first. Okay, I'm going to just test it here. Okay, that looks a little bit dark, but if I take some moisture out, that will be the color I want to do. So it's going to be a plant in the shadow, so that's why it's going to have that pale blue color. So I'm just going to go for the top silhouette, color it all in. One shape is going to blend into another, so I'm not going to have a specific volume building up. I'm just coloring it in, okay, as if you've done coloring by numbers, just evenly as possible. Right, I've done up to this stage. I'll do another one here. Okay, I'm going to quickly take my small brush and lift tiny bit of color from the top of each oval. Wash the brush, dry the brush, the tiny bit of light showing on the top. Tiny bit of light showing on the top. And the same for this one. Okay, tiny bit. And further down, I'm going to increase the amount of darkness. Tiny bit more blue, tiny bit more purple. And further down, I'm going to go just a hint of darker. If it feels too dark, all I'm doing, I'm adding some extra water to my brush. I don't want it runny, but I want it moist enough to keep the color flowing, the paint flowing. So I need gorgeous lines, staying within hopefully the shapes. If you see some other elements, little shapes of the leaves peeping up as part of the silhouette, go for it. Make sure you don't have any stripes. That's where the amount of water comes in. A nice moist area will give you a flat shape. Okay, so all of this one's here. We can do a tiny bit of lifting off tone here as well, although it's not quite on our sample, but I think we can do that just gently. So I wash the brush, I dry the brush, do a stroke, and I dry it again. Okay, I think I'll do a tiny bit wider here actually. And then a tiny bit more again, darker. I think my brush is getting a bit more watery color. So I can put now a leaf here, paint a silhouette of a leaf. Okay, and go into the stem here, and another shape of a leaf. Just make sure you've got enough moisture. It doesn't go too dry or stripy again. That's why it will look like a silhouette. Again, tiny bit more darkness. Increase, especially for the stems. And then we've got one more leaf here. To go across. Okay, can make it again tiny bit more darker towards the bottom here. Moving into the stem again. And we'll do very similar things to the flowers, but I'm going to let you finish it first, and then we'll move and do similar shapes to the flowers below. So it's reasonably simple technique from one darkness to another, from one shape to another, keeping everything silhouette-like. I might just touch up tiny, oops, that's quite dark. Tiny bit of darkness for some of these buds. Just make sure it's not too dark, just at the bottom, just to add a bit more shadow. It will soften. My paper is still quite wet. Okay, that's just a little bit of extra soft shadows introduction, just to show a little bit of a volume from a distance. Okay, before we do our flowers below for the same stem, I'm just going to do some stamens, yellowy orangey colors. I'm going to let them dry. So I'll mix some cadmium yellow and some orange. I'm going to make it not too runny. I want it to dry reasonably quickly. And also I want it to be quite intensive in comparison to some of the first stamens we've done. So not too runny. So I dried my brush. I'm going to paint it over. Okay. And while I've got the same color, I'm going to touch up some of the shadows of my stamens on my central flowers, but I'm going to do it in little dots. So I'm not going to overwork it by accident, okay? Tiny little dots on one side, just to show a bit of a shadow. Tiny little dots on the other side. Less is more. I can always top it up. I'll just do a little bit, stop for now. And if I need more later on, I can add more later on, okay? Just little dots. Where they're going to be, maybe at the bottom or on the one side of that stamen, okay? Already gives it a nice texture. I don't know if you can see it much from that distance or not on the camera, but it just gently comes in here. And that will stay to dry. Well, I can do exactly the same to what I've done with purpley blue stem of the buds with the stem of the hollyhocks on the right hand side. I'm going to start with a paler blue. I'm going to start it with a paler blue and then move more into the violets, just for the variety of it. Let's just check my color so I'm not going too dark too quickly. So pale blue. Maybe a tiny bit of violet is going to come up here. Dragging the color across. Okay, so a couple of larger buds, and I'm going to lift tiny bit of color on the top of them. And I'm going to start increasing my bluey purpley or bluey violet color further down. Tiny bit of darkness for these ones, making sure that my stem is solid enough to carry on, to hold on to these big buds, so it's not too slender. Okay, carrying on those shapes further down. And I'm going to paint it close to the edge of my drawing for the leaf. There are loads of details going on which we don't have to know exactly what they are. So I'm just going to stop at it here. I'm going to add tiny bit of darkness to the stem here, just to show that it's going maybe in front of some of the buds, and maybe tiny bit of the shadows under the buds, very, very small amount. I quite like that the top part of my stem stayed pale and quite runny. I just add a little bit of extra texture of leaves here, just looks a little bit bland. And that section is finished now as well. So let's have a look at the bottom part of the left-hand side hollyhock flowers. So what we used here, we used purple and blue together. So this is the color I'm going to get started with, and then I'll add a bit of pink. Again, quite a bit of purple and then a bit of pink. Or magenta, or any of those colors would be absolutely fine. As long as they will link at the start, at the top, with our initial colors, that'd be marvelous. So I had some blue and some magenta there. I think that's my color. So I'll start quite dark at the top of the flower, still doing a silhouette of it. If you end up with a flower very similar in a silhouette as the branch above, you're fine as well. If it's slightly different to what the artist done here, that's brilliant as well. Okay, so I've got some of my purple here, purpley blue. I'm going to add now some fresh pink, and I'm going to paint around the stamen, sorry. Okay, all the way around here. So my color is flat. It doesn't have what's light, what's dark. It's just flat. Okay. If I wanted to increase small amount of darkness, I can bring a bit more increased color of the violet and magenta, just to show that a bit more depth of the flower, you know, in the middle of it. And while it's on a wet surface, we can do that. And then I'm going to move into the second flower. Now the second flower looks like we've got some extra darkness next to it, but we can do that one afterwards. I'm going to do more or less similar thing. I'm going to go for our color first, purpley blue. I'm going to do the edge, the silhouette of the flower. I'm going to follow my pencil drawing here. I'm going to maybe dilute my brush and have some paler lines, not lines, shapes here. I'm not coming too close to the yellow section because I want to introduce another color there shortly. And I want to go for a small amount of pink and orange, which I just had on my palette here. So I want the stamen to stand out, but the pinky orangey color coming around it. You could have just gone for pink or just orange, that would have been fine as well. And again, I'm going to introduce a small amount of darker color, maybe on the edge here of the petals, just to show the volume, and maybe on the edge, the border with the flower, border where the stamen is, just to show, because it's a dry surface where that middle section is, the paint is not going to go there, but it will soften in where we want it to be. Okay. Good. I think I'm just going to do tiny bit of pink around my stamens on my darker silhouette flowers of the hollyhocks. I think just tiny bit of extra pink will just give it a bit more extra depth here, adding some volume as well. And that one might just have very small amount. Again, that's an extra one. You don't have to do this. Just follow the big shapes first. Kind of work into the big areas first, they're more important. And then I'll work with my greens. I'll have the yellow green first. Quite a lot of cadmium yellow. Just make sure there is no red in it. And some yellowish green. If you don't have yellowish green, any other green, just put extra yellow for the area. I'm going to have top buds. I'm looking a little bit more cool, so I'm going to only have a stem in this color. So yellowy green, quite pale for the stems. Okay, so the first bud which will have yellowish green will be this one. So I'm just going to gently do a couple of strokes and leave some of the other ones blank. There is. Continue with the stem, maybe just a little bit of warmth on another bud here. Continue with the stems. The stem could start getting a bit more strength, a little bit more increased amount of yellow and green, so it looks more saturated. Okay, and then maybe some more yellow and green on the bud. There's big bud here as well. You can place more yellow in some areas, green in other areas. And then I'm going further down. And again, painting. I think these ones are okay because we already have done them. But the areas here close to the big flowers could be all painted in a nice solid yellowy green color. We'll do the textures of it afterwards whilst they dry. That's nice and easy. Now we're ready for the green buds on the branch. We're ready to add some cooler colors. So we'll go for some emerald green. And we'll mix it with a tiny bit of our yellowish green, okay? And what we'll do now, without painting too solid, I'm going to have a very transparent layer of emerald green. I'm going to try to follow like almost as if I would be painting individual petals on my buds. So if part of the background is still seen, you know, you still can see some of it, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I might just have little gaps there. And part of my stem could have a little bit of that emerald green come across as well, so almost like a little shadow on it. Next bud again, some of the petals are going to be painted. Maybe for this one I can have a tiny bit of yellowy green here to have a little bit more volume to it, a bit more darkness to it. Okay, tiny bit more darkness maybe for under the stem area to show the shadow. Okay, the same here, maybe a little bit of, tiny bit of warmth on the bottom leaf. The top one could go for paler emerald green diluted. You just mix gently with a yellowy green. It's almost transparency and preservation of the background. That's what we're looking for. Might have tiny bit of blue with my emerald green here. That's a bit too strong. Just to create an extra shadow for the bud here. So it's a bit more heavier. Same for this one, maybe at the top. I'm just gently touching it up. Okay, the stem is good. Next one again, I'm doing a petal on the bottom and almost like gaps between the petals, how they're opening up. Yeah. Tiny bit more darkness at that little center. Almost like a little flower, how the leaves are allowing the small petals to open up gently. Okay, this one is easy. That's all of it could go together. Yellowy green, emerald green all together here. All of it together. Let's have a look what the stems are doing here as well. So this one looks a bit darker. Maybe on the side of the main stems it looks like a bit darker. So our stem is not like it's not the same color all the way across. It's slightly changing its darkness throughout. Again, tiny bit more darker green. And we can paint now the middle part between the yellowy green leaves. There may be other leaves preserving our precious petals which are not ready. They're not full of color yet, not full of pink. And that distinctive emerald green is very characteristic for the hollyhocks. Okay, that's when trying to before touching up any details. But the little leaf here, again, I can combine the yellow green with some emerald green with it. Paint the whole shape. Link it to the stem. And then if you feel adventurous, increase the amount of green or tiny bit of blue and just put a couple of dabs of extra color just to show that volume. I think this stem is much darker, so I think I can make that one a little bit more stronger. Yeah, okay. Just need to link it to the bud so it's not looking separate from it. And anything else a little bit more darker green, maybe in the middle of the petals here. I can stretch the green out. Maybe on the bottom of the whole big green bud, something tiny bit more darker. Which part of the stem is going to have more of a shadow? Maybe a little mark, maybe a little dot, maybe a good chunk of a section. There's not much space here, so just a little mark here and there just for variety. Okay. And as my buds, green buds are drying, I can also decide if there are any other shadows or little marks need to be sharpened. Let's say for the center parts of the openings, or for tiny bit of corners. Again, that's minor nuances, which we don't have to do till the end, or sometimes not even including them does make big difference. Most importantly is doing the big shapes, the big full petals or volumes. What's going to stay dark or light is more important. Those details are a little extra. Okay, I'm getting quite happy with that. Okay, if it's too wet, you might not be able to do it. You might need to wait for it. And if you keep working on this one, that'd be brilliant. What I'll do the same thing on the bottom here. It's not much difference. It's a repetition of the same thing. So I'll continue working without waiting for you. It's increasing of the light and darkness of some of the petals here. Sorry, petals, leaves of the green buds. They're quite stripy here, maybe because they've got more light on them, so we can see the definition a bit better. I'm going to keep them quite simple. Again, the stem could stay a tiny bit more dark in places. When I come to the leaf here, I'll just paint one side of it a tiny bit darker and leave the other side pale, or just a couple of veins. All the rest will stay pale. Maybe a darker greenish corner here, because we're going to be doing some leaves there as well. Again, as it's drying, I can increase the darkness of the greeny blue, and just put a couple of extra little touches, dots, tiny sharpened lines, or direction of them, of the veins here in the leaf. Okay, so that's all done as well. Right, so now we're going to look at some details on the leaves at the front here. Well, we just done the buds, green buds. I'm going to do exactly the same technique for the leaf here on the right hand side here, almost in the middle. So I'm going to increase the darkness and create some of the shadows, veins, little patterns. going to put it as a big chunk together. Don't worry about the outline of it yet, because we're going to have other colors to do them. Okay, I'm just going to simplify it here so it's going to be too busy. And maybe increase the darkness, and maybe for part of that shadow, just put some of it a tiny bit more darker here. Okay, that's done. And I'm going to do some of the shapes. I'm still using the same small brush because the shapes are staying reduced in size, so it's easier to move about with them. So I'm going to have quite a bit of yellow on my brush first. I'm going to do a leaf here, middle left corner, kind of central-ish. Let's have some more stronger yellow here at the bottom for it. Just painting one leaf close to the pinky flowers. Done that yellowy green color. I'm going to go for more emerald green now. Around the shape of it, I'm going to come close to the petals of the pink flowers so I can again define them. If I need to do any indentations, it's perfect time to do that. A bit more darker color on the edge of this leaf. If again wanted to do a shape of it a bit better, I can do that. Can do tiny bit more darkness next to the pinky flowers. I think that will be a little bit better tone wise. So it's almost that leaf is coming out from under the flowers, and I've got a bit of a line for it, so I'm just going to just gently persuade it to smudge outwards. Okay, that's looking better. Okay, and then for the area here, I'm going to do some flat leaves, whatever I've got on my palette here, any of those greens. I'm going to paint the whole big shape here. I'm going to keep it flat. I'm just following my pencil lines here. If you, when you were sketching, you a little bit got lost with what you were sketching or what's been happening, so maybe just look out for a similar silhouette I just done. Okay, one leaf. It's a little bit of a darker shape. So we're going to start painting now positive, negative spaces of different leaves. I'm going to use a bit of violet and small amount of emerald green. Okay, more into the green but pale. And I'm going to paint a little silhouette of it using this color, the space between the leaves. So it's going to be all this bottom shape space. Again, I'm following my pencil line, so in that sense it's much easier for me rather than just finding that shape. Okay, so I've got a gap here. If I wanted my flower and the leaf I've done initially to stand out better, I'm going to go for a nice solid violet here. And I'm going to paint a nice dark shadow. Again, defining the edge. I think that's looking more blue rather than violet, so let me just go for a little bit more stronger color. Okay, that's better. Okay. And merge it with my leaf here. Okay, there might be some lights and darkness of leaves, flowers, not quite sure, shadows of other plants. What's underneath of it is not too clear. Some of this purple is going to start merging with some a little bit of green. Somewhere else, yes, might be again some of the leaves. So it's just going from one color to another, from one color to another. That's going to be another dark leaf shape. Greeny, violety in color. With some gaps we can see. So that's where our imagination is starting to read, is that the shadow, is that the leaf, is that the background? And it doesn't matter which one is which. Just creating some patterns of light and dark. Okay, you don't have to match exactly what you think it might be. We're going to be just leaving some gaps of light and dark in this area, moving from emerald green to violet, from violet to emerald green again. Okay, creating some nice shadows and a nice strong edges for under the flowers. And you can find your own way of doing this as well. Now when I'll come close to the green branch here, I'll just make sure that my colors are not clashing with the same greens. So I might go for more purpley green and make it stand out. I'll dilute some color. Okay. Again, just painting a section at a time, painting the background, color it all in. What I'll just zoom in so we can see it better as well. And some gaps between the leaves here. So it's a nice dark gap. We can also have a little shadow, so I'll dilute this color. And there might be a paler shadow here as well. So that's how we're separating one surface from another, one layer of leaves from another. So it's very suggestive. What's at the top, what's at the back, very suggestive. Just try to stick to shape rather than line. Yes, there might be a border, but don't keep it as a line, keep it as a bit more of a shape. Right, I quite like that one. I might just do another dark leaf here. This leaf has a lot of magenta, which is quite exciting color reflecting into a leaf. Okay, so if I'll put some of that magenta here, maybe even pinky color. Okay, and then move into my yellowy green. So this could stay there and dry for a little before I do all the dark backgrounds on this side. And I think I could do with a tiny bit of extra color. I think I've got more space in here on the actual piece we're working from. There's a little bit of pink as well from the other flowers, so maybe I'll introduce a little bit of pale pink for some other petals which we can't quite see in big volume. I'll let them dry and work a little bit more into the darker background. So for the darker background, I'll go for some indigo and some violet. Okay, so I'll vary it between indigo and violet, or violet indigo. Again, I still want to see the color more than the darkness. So for example, here I've got a nice shadow. So all I'm going to do is just to fill that shadow with some color. Okay, it just looks very dark, so I want to see the color better. I made a tiny bit more water. If I'm coming up to the leaf here, I'll just blend it out. So it goes a tiny bit paler, maybe. So all the principles are the same, something lighter, something darker, following the silhouette, but I'm just painting things around shapes. And because the artists we're using already have done the job for us of working out what's going to be the stem, what's going to be the background, what's going to be where, we just following that worked out formula, that worked out pattern. Okay, that's gappers there. Quite like this leaf, but I think it might need a little bit of extra darkness. I think I'm quite happy to add extra darkness to it. Maybe via veins or just extra shapes here. Okay, that's good. Anything else in this area? Yes, some extra darkness now to outline the shape of the green branch with the buds. And I can also create extra leaves by just painting kind of shapes. So that might be an extra leaf, this might be an extra leaf. The way I'm painting it, that silhouette helps me to do that. This might be an extra leaf. I can just shape it up. Okay, any gaps between here could create me some space, and I'll see the buds more at the front, and everything else is going to be the background color. Minor little things, very easy technique, just painting gaps. Anything else here? Maybe I'll do a little bit more of a shape here. Another shadow. Actually, I don't think I need this one, so I will get rid of it. Link it to another shadow. Just touch up any other dark areas which could give me a little bit of extra tension. They will dry and settle in better, so they're not going to be overly sharp. Okay, there. And I'll use a bit more diluted color, so it's not going to be taking too much attention to create suggestive shadows on the leaves. A little bit of extra texture coming from the right hand side, so it doesn't take too much attention, but we know it is there. Some more vegetation, some more plants growing on that side. Okay, but it doesn't take too much attention away from the central flowers. And at this stage, I'll need to look for any other details which could help my flowers to stand out. For example, I've forgotten the shadow here, so any other gaps not filled in yet. Any other minor nuances, a little line here or a little dot space here, a little bit of tension building up. Okay, that's come out a bit too dark here. But that will be individual to everybody's work. I think I'm just going to do a tiny bit of tension here. A couple of happy dots here and there. Extra careful. We worked extremely hard not to overwork it in the last minute. I think I can feel I can add a little bit more volume defining this petal. That's better. That could stay soft at the background because I don't want to have too much details on that area. Okay, this one could have a tiny bit more darkness around it as well. Again, just a little tension rather than anything else. Maybe a small amount of veins just on the ridge of the petals here, so just to show where they're changing their darkness, coming from dark then going into the shiny part of the petals. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's have a look at all of the flower here together as well. Okay, so there's a gap here. I think I can also shape this one slightly better. this leaf look a little too strong in color on its own. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to soften its edge on the left hand side, if it will allow me. Just gently like this. And then I'm going to bring that greeny blue lighter version a little bit more forward, so then it's bordering with the rest of the pale colors in a much softer way. I think that will be better. Just looking for anything else might need touching. As I said, maybe a little dot here and there. If I'm doing an extra dot, maybe I'll soften its edges so it doesn't stand out on its own. Overall, I think I'm quite happy with it. Let me zoom out and let's see the whole picture together. Okay, I think our painting is finished.